Secretary Kempthorne truly is one of those unique individuals who has spent a major part of his career in public service on a variety of levels. He was first elected as the mayor of Boise, Idaho, and was told at the time that it was a dead-end job. Far from a dead end, though, Secretary Kempthorne went on to serve in the U.S. Senate, then on to become the governor of Idaho. He became the Secretary of the Interior in 2006 and works in that capacity to preserve the national treasures of the United States for future generations. I first got to know Secretary Kempthorne because the two of us are Harley-Davidson riders, and we've shared some wonderful times on the roads of Northern Virginia together. It's my pleasure now to introduce Secretary Kempthorne. Take it away, Dirk.
Thank you, John, very much. John, thank you very much. John and I do ride our Harleys. We ride with Josh Bolton. When Michael heard that the President's Chief of Staff had arrived and that he was going to come over to the table and shake hands, Michael leans over to me and says, "I know people in this town." Karen Nussel, thank you for what you do. Thank you for bringing us together as you have here. And Doctor, thank you for what you do to make this a reality. This is very powerful, what has taken place. As John pointed out yesterday, I was able to spend an hour with these 60 delightful young Americans. And my goodness, Madeline, who asked me questions about offshore oil drilling, asking these young people what did they see in Washington, D.C. that inspired them, that they will take back as memories. And some of the responses, the fact that the Library of Congress really had an impact on them, the fact that the metro system, young man had never been in a subway before, let alone seen an escalator that long. It's true. I know what he's talking about. John Roberts, who introduced me, someone that we all have come to know through his professionalism on that television screen. I think John would agree with me how transformational television can be. It's interesting that in the 60s, some of you may remember that Andy Griffith was Andy Taylor in the family TV show Mayberry RFD. Dick Van Dyke starred in the Dick Van Dyke comedy show. Angela Lansbury starred as Miss Price in Bedknobs and Broomsticks. And then just a couple decades later, Andy Griffith had a new series as a detective who investigated murder in the TV series Matlock. Dick Van Dyke starred as Dr. Mark Sloan in Diagnosis Murder. And Angela Lansbury starred in Murder, She Wrote. I do not think that it's possible that we can flip through the channels on any given night and not see that there are stories of murder. In fact, every hour you can find some channel that has a murder mystery. This is a sign, perhaps an indicator of what is happening to the society. There was another time when violence was also the center of entertainment. At the Roman Colosseum, the masses gathered to watch great spectacles of violence. Innocent people were humiliated, brutalized, murdered as a form of perverse entertainment. Today we have a modern version of the Roman Colosseum. Elements of the internet. Even as we speak, children across this country are being bullied and humiliated before an audience that includes their schoolmates, their friends, and anyone else in the world who has an internet connection. As part of this terrible trend, bullies are posting videos of their acts of intimidation and violence on internet sites. In Europe, they have a name for this. They call it happy slapping. Perhaps it should have another name, felony. There is no question that humankind has benefited enormously from advances in technology. Cell phones, email, the internet, digital photography, and other innovations have improved our lives. But like any tool, they can be misused. The National Crime Prevention Council reported last year that 43% of young people had experienced some form of cyberbullying. It was most prevalent among 15 and 16-year-olds, and particularly among girls. We can easily imagine a child cowering in the middle of a great coliseum, buffeted by merciless teasing and insults that crush his or her spirit, believing that the whole world is watching. The fact that we now have a new term in our language, bullycide, shows the magnitude of the problem. Arguably, what is happening to our children online is merely an extension of what is happening throughout our society. Through television, film, and now the internet and video games, we're continually exposed to graphic depictions of violence. How many hours of Grand Theft Auto does a child have to play before the mangling of a human becomes mundane and a human life becomes worth very little? Those who are abusers were often the abused as children. Those who inflict violence often were the victims of violence as children. If we let our children grow up in a culture of violence, we will reap a bitter harvest. I say all this because recently I received a book that I've been reading that it ought to become one of the New York Times bestsellers. It is a book that contains hope, that contains courage, that contains insight, that contains honesty. It's a book that when you read, you are inspired by it. These authors have such insight into life. It's very impressive. The book I actually have was autographed by the authors. It's right here. It's this book that these 60 kids wrote. They've autographed it. When you listen to the one-liners delivered by these young people, you sensed the brilliance that they have. When I listened to them yesterday, what they have been exposed to, what they're dealing with, the courage, the fact that rather than leashing out, they're taking this approach of sharing their insight. This is courage. This gives us hope because we just experienced the next generation, the younger generation. There's an adage, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good.